everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unfiltered at the Water Cooler. My name is Melissa Evers, co-founder and head of ecosystem at Kreneon, and today I am delighted to welcome Hannah Kuhl, who is one of our advisors. As you guys may remember, we've gone through our founders and now are branching out into our advisors and other parts of our team. And so I'm delighted to bring you a fresh perspective directly from London with Hannah. So with that, Hannah, why don't we just start with you introducing yourself and giving us a little bit of your story?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, live from London. My name's Hannah Kuhl. My background is one of data advisory. I have worked in Big Four consulting strategy environments for many years, but the focus has always been on data management, on sourcing and single source of truth for quality information and management decision making. It's been on cloud transformation programs across organizations, big corporates, whether they're financial institutions or big retailers or .coms and digital organizations that are moving from legacy environments to new cloud environments and trying to get to quality transactional data and bringing multiple data sources from across organizations together so you can create efficiencies, reduce costs. Now, that all makes perfect sense, right? But these programs and change is hard for any big organization. So it's kind of change. So it's how do you run those programs such that you can showcase that you have saved money, you have made the organization better, you are making better decisions on the basis of quality data. And sometimes it's just the evidencing of that that's hard. So that was my background, right? Data nerd over here. And then the whole ESG revolution came about. And, my personal story is that I was working on a program in the Netherlands, based in London, but working on a massive program for a big client of mine in the Netherlands. And I was flying a massive team out to the Netherlands every week, right? These were specialists in their field that were based in London that we had to get out to the client. And because I'm a geographer by trade, I did a dissertation, would you believe it, on sea level rise many, many years ago. So my little geographer heart broke every time I was flying 200 consultants from London to Amsterdam. And I thought, do you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm going to bring someone up and see what we can do to invest some money in planting some trees, which is, what I thought would be a good thing to do at the time, or restoring some peatlands. This is my undergrad knowledge coming out to be like, this is what we can do. And it was really hard to get that signed off. Like there was a central pot to do corporate social responsibility with, but there was nothing integrated into how we would run these big programs that said, we're making an impact over here. The responsible thing to do would be to deliver the program this way, such that we are delivering profitably, but also ethically. Right. And it was the ethics of the project and how we delivered that was really driving me. Anyway, so we had a big conversation, and about a year later, the ESG revolution took off, and one of the board members rang me up and said, hey, do you want to set up an ESG team? And I said, yeah, I think I do. So that was kind of how it kicked off for me at the Big Four.
That's so cool.
And then from there, I've worked across the space, and unsurprisingly, sourcing high quality data to make decisions around what does sustainability in a corporate environment look like has been a big part of my remit. Now, I was novel in the sense that regulatory reporting and the policy-driven or the compliance-driven lens of sustainability never really floated my boat. In fact, I thought that had the potential, and I'll let listeners draw their own conclusions as to where we've ended up, but I thought it had the potential to end very badly for sustainability as an endeavour, as an initiative, as something that needed to be integrated into delivering and running businesses, because you are putting a massive cost. It's a compliance cost, it's a regulatory burden, it's a people cost, it's an administrative cost, rather than something that says, here's the value at the end of it. This is what we've achieved, this is what we've done, this is how much money we've saved. And it front loaded it into that compliance cost cap.
Right.
And if you're doing lots of regulatory reporting, you've got to spin up huge teams, and actually the regulatory burden grew and grew and grew, but the value levers didn't seem to match or mirror that. And my ultimate question always was, what are we measuring? Like, what data? Where's it coming from? We need to orchestrate an entire market set of data to be able to deliver trusted information. You can't just click your fingers and expect to have supply chains worth of data.
Yeah.
And for me, it was an orchestration exercise. So a lot of what I've been doing over the last few years is understanding, how can we measure emissions a bit more simply? And rather than asking individual organizations to create their own calculation methodologies to deliver and understand their businesses, if we could have, in the same way we have open banking and open payments data, could we have open energy data?
Right.
Because really what matters, if we really boil it down, and we're trying to be super simple, is as an individual, as a business, how much energy am I consuming, and what type of energy is it? And how much, if we extend this to Kreneon, how much water am I consuming? And ultimately we get to the point that, and that doesn't have to be a good or a bad thing, but it means that we can understand what's going on across the market. We can aggregate, we can build that through supply chains. We can understand benchmarks and say, okay, you're in the top 5% of consumers. Let's try and be a bit more efficient about this, right? You can start to understand what that marketplace looks like, but we really struggle to do that. So my focus has been energy data. And I was introduced to Kreneon, and I thought, wow, everything I've been trying to do on a market for open energy data and trusted and reliable information that allows us to make decisions, to allocate costs, to understand commercial levers, that's fundamental to what Kreneon is trying to build. So I've answered two questions there in a really lengthy way. I've told you who I am and why I do what I do, and also how I was connected into you. So you didn't ask for that, but there you go.
Yeah, I hadn't even gotten there yet. So you've talked about this a little bit, but I'm interested if you have other thoughts on, is there something specific about the Kreneon approach that really drew you to throwing your weight behind this effort?
Yeah, well, for me, it's the concept of building out and leveraging existing market infrastructure. The market infrastructure and the flows of capital are there, and there's tons of money, right? If people say there isn't money to invest in sustainable projects, no, there's plenty of money. It just needs to find the projects. It needs to be allowed to flow effectively. We need to be able to aggregate demand. We need to match demand to supply, all of that stuff. But the market is there. The money is there. The financial systems exist. We just need to make sure they work for sustainable projects and they are measured and accrued and accounted for in the same way. So this concept of leveraging existing market infrastructure and how money flows and how value is attributed really, really struck me as something that was synonymous with the work that I've been doing with energy data.
Right. Well, and I think also back to your, I'm a data nerd. Kreneon's approach is data first, right? It's measurement at device with explicit trusted data collection. And I think that also has a lot of synergy with what you described as your passion.
Completely. I mean, everything that I've been doing has been advising government, regulators, financial institutions on unlocking access to trusted energy data. And at the moment, like we have, even I think about this from a UK perspective, we have a fantastic network of smart meters, and that metering system for energy is being rolled out even further. It's improving. We obviously have the kind of precursor to that of analog. And that data exists. It's there. We have massive data repositories that either sit with the energy providers or the central energy systems providers that has all of that information. The problem and the challenge that we face is more about consent, permissioning, and access. And that challenge is eminently solvable. We just need to think about it not in the sense that, we can't access that data, therefore we've got to ask for it, we've got to push calculations and compliance through the marketplace. No, we've done similar with open banking, right? We can access that data where there is the right permissioning, where there's the right use and the right requirements and the right underlying access need, it's the same. And I think that trust piece is so important, because what I worry and what I think is happening at the moment is we've created so many market benchmarks on relatively small samples of data, and we've used lots of models, and we then attribute those models to individual businesses, and there is this underlying lack of trust. And it's good enough for kind of finger in the air portfolio assessments, risk management, trend, great. But what it's not good enough for is for saying, what next for this organization? What next for my organization? What's going to be the biggest lever I can pull to create commercial advantage for me? What's going to save me money?
Right.
And that's, we need to make getting to that point as easy as possible. And we do have loads of data. The data, it is for me more about the market infrastructure to access it, to bring it together, and to use it.
Yeah.
And the same is for water, which is why I love what you guys are thinking about in terms of what does the infrastructure look like to not only measure and meter water production, net new water production, and make sure that infrastructure is in place at point of delivery, but also point of receipt as well. And then the really important bit is that data repository that collates and collects those records and attributes that. And that's where we get to something that then becomes eminently usable for the market and for pricing and for trading decisioning, etc., and for contracting.
I'd love you to elaborate a little bit more on the work that you're doing with Bankers for Net Zero and the Athena Foundation, and how this complements what you've just described.
So Bankers for Net Zero was an initiative that was brought together to convene the UK finance sector alongside a global network of like-minded financial services organisations that were committed to the net zero agenda, but more importantly focused on their portfolios, managing risk, but also helping their customers, right? How do their customers become more resilient? How do their customers save money in light of rising energy costs? And all of this has been built over the last few years in an amazing network. The focus has been, what are the partnerships, the digital infrastructure that's needed to aid us on that journey, and where we start co-collaborating, designing solutions, partnerships, what do we then need to say to government to make sure policy falls in behind and alongside, so it aids the journey? Like I've always been, and very similar to Kreneon, there's so many reasons that I love you guys, but I've always been very markets first. Like the markets can do this, right? If we just nut heads together. For me, it shouldn't be policy or regulatory first, but there is absolutely a role for policy and regulation in coming in behind to mop up the stragglers, if you like.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree with you. I think that's one of the things as we've studied other markets, like, the renewable energy market, et cetera, regulation and tax incentives and things like that absolutely have a critical role to play. But if you don't have the capital structures in place to enable capital to flow, those policies or incentives go nowhere. They don't do anything. And so it really is both. And you can do it without, right? If you have the right structures within the markets. But yeah, I totally hear you.
And what's been really interesting is obviously, where we started was very much an emissions and energy focused journey, but I'm hearing more from the banks that I work with that water is this gnarly problem that we keep talking about, and we keep thinking about, future issues where there's too much water, i.e. risk of flooding, and how do we manage physical risk in a changing climate, and what does that mean for our portfolios and assets within our portfolios. But equally, it's the unspoken risk around not enough water. You know, water is a finite and precious resource and commodity. It's becoming more so. I was listening to the CEO of Ofwat in the UK today, and I didn't know this, but he was talking about a projected 5 billion litre shortfall in water that we face by 2055.
And that's a UK comment?
Yes, and that's in the UK, right? And that's based on, you know, expecting demand to rise based in changing population, based in changing demand needs. Data centers is an obvious one, as well as the shift and changing climate. So, you know, we can see the potential problem on the horizon. We've been talking about water as a finite and precious commodity for a long time, but how are we creating the market mechanisms to protect, to ensure delivery, to ensure that there are reasons for being efficient, and how that is baked into business value? We don't have that yet. And for me, it's like, who are the people, Kreneon being one, who are the people that are thinking about this long-term infrastructural change and financial change to actually deliver that into the market? Because we will not do this by mandating conservation, because our measurement system and our metering system, even in the UK, is not up to scratch at the moment.
Yeah, which is actually a really great segue to my next question. So I'm curious, with all the work you've been doing, and you've been in this space journeying with the industry for some time, from your vantage point, what are the biggest bottlenecks that are holding back either, you know, energy conservation and energy transformation, or water infrastructure, environmental MRVs, et cetera? I'm curious what you see as the biggest bottlenecks that as an industry we need to be focused on.
Cool. I mean, there's no one answer to this and there's no right answer to this, but my perspective is, I think so many people will say there's a lack of funding. We don't have the project finance or the investment into water infrastructure, into new projects, be it, you know, new generation, be it transport of water, be it desalination or cleaning or reuse plants. Like, where's the money coming from? Where's the investment? But I think the investment potential is there. I've already said there's tons of money.
Right.
My issue and my perspective is we are constrained by the type and the ability to aggregate and source information to make those investment decisions. Markets, and you've said this, it's about trust. They will only allocate capital, and even more so now in such a volatile environment, markets will only allocate capital if they can trust what the projections are and what the investment return is, and that there is demand out there, right? And, you know, we've spent a fair few decades now, I guess, building the standards and settlement systems and contracting mechanisms for renewable energy and green energy infrastructure. And, you know, it's not perfect, but we're getting there. And I think water is kind of where we were with green energy however many years ago. It's much earlier in that journey. And we just don't have the ability to price risk, to underwrite water risk, or recognize where there is water risk in terms of whether there's, I said this earlier, too much or too little.
Right.
How do we compare opportunities for investment in water? And I guess, you know, the absence of that infrastructure is meaning that we're not leveraging the financial markets and the sheer volume of capital that they could provide to its fullest extent.
Yeah, no, that makes great sense. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. You are an advisor to Kreneon, and you've articulated from a business model perspective and an approach perspective why you are an advocate. I'm curious if you have any comments on your optimism given the team that's building Kreneon.
Well, you guys are fab. Full stop. I mean, it's all about the people, isn't it? Every business that I've worked with that has been successful, I can always take it back to the energy, the dynamism, and the passion of the people that I work with. Always. That's the single biggest underlying consistent factor in any successful business. And I'm drawn to work with people that are passionate about their area, are hugely connected in their area with, you know, wealth of expertise and experience, but ultimately the drive to keep going through the walls, right? No, I don't think anyone will question that what Kreneon is trying to do is easy. It's not. You know, we're doing something new, and I think especially in certain like each region is different as well. Putting a price on water is hard for people to reconcile. But in a world where water is becoming a finite and precious commodity, is that something we need to do? Do we need to have a serious conversation about that? And my assertion is yes, we do need to have a conversation about that. And how we create the commercial incentives for more people to create water, to invest in water, to deliver water. Like that's why this is beneficial. But when you have, I guess, monopoly markets to a certain extent, where water is such a national endeavor, it is a utility, overlaying private markets onto that can feel like you're butting heads. It's not to say it's impossible. It can be done. We wouldn't be doing it if we couldn't. But there are challenges that we need to work through. But to your question, you can only do that with a team that sees through those challenges and is able to work across the market to present, showcase, and build a cohort of people that believe in the solutions that we're putting forward. So that's
well, I totally agree with you. And I think, you know, one of the things that's been really interesting to me as we've gone through this journey thus far is this notion that you know, you talked about, you know, governments and private markets butting heads a little bit. The only way we solve the capital funding gaps for water is through private markets, and private markets have not really engaged in water infrastructure to this point. And that's a global comment. And so really trying to, you know, we saw it in energy, this massive transition from it being a public service and public good to privatization and the, you know, just enormous growth of energy production based upon that. And I think we're going to see, which has served the planet, you know, very well, huge expansive growth in renewables, et cetera. And so I think we're going to see something really similar happen in water.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we need to, and you know, I'm a complete realist about is it's blooming expensive and blooming difficult to transport water. And the energy that it would require to transport water is something that, of course, needs to be factored into our thinking. And historically, that's why it's not something that has been done, because where's the value in it? Like you have a water source, you transport locally. Resource, supply, demand, localized. It's a localized utility. The bit, and we talked about this, is where is the risk? Like, where are the projections around water usage, demand in those localized areas based on business use, based on population and consumer use? And do we have the supply to meet the demand? It's really difficult to articulate that, and the markets certainly aren't finding a way to do that. You know, there are obviously pieces of research and utilities that are looking far into the future ahead. You know, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to give you that figure on 5 billion litres that we are the shortfall that's projected by 2055. So there is an underlying awareness of that risk and where the exposure points are. But until we can understand that risk and the demand, how can you then put a price on whether it's worth transporting it and finding other ways to access water supply and where that supply comes from?
For sure, for sure. And one of the things that I think is really interesting as we've studied other industries is, the massive oil pipelines didn't exist until we commodified oil and we figured out, oh, it's worth the cost of moving this stuff, right?
Mhm.
Natural gas, the same exact thing. So I think there will be cases where the economics of supply and demand predicate building water pipelines. But it's just, you're absolutely right. Until we have price transparency and clarity with regard to demand and scarcity, where the economics of those projects we're not able to pencil them out because we don't have that visibility, and that's absolutely something that Kreneon will solve in the fullness of time, which is a great transition. I'm conscious of our time. So 5-year vision, 10-year vision, your moonshot, when Kreneon is successful and deployed globally and transforming water infrastructure, what do you think that future is going to look like?
Do you know, we had a really exciting conversation at a conference I was at with Mike a few months ago now. And we talked about the future whereby the UK had really taken a leading role in water provision and water futures contracts around water, the financial infrastructure that allows us to trade water. And obviously all of this is spitballing, right? You never get to a realized future unless you project and you think about what it could look like, And we talked about Brent crude. You just mentioned oil, right?
Right.
And Brent crude is so named because of the North Sea oil field that gave it its benchmark name, right? And now it's not just because that's where it came from, but it's because London, the UK, built the market around that resource, like the risk management, the pricing, the contracts, the regulation, like the market design that allows for Brent crude to be traded. And now, that's one of our, it's billions and billions flow through that infrastructure daily, right? Why couldn't we have that for water and make sure that those that have water need water? So not only are we creating, growth and return, but we're solving one of the biggest future environmental challenges on our hands as well. What's not to love about that moonshot vision? And for the UK, right? How special would it be if the UK could really own that? Our financial services industry is phenomenal. It has retained its prowess over the years. London is, or why shouldn't London be the global home for pricing water and trading trusted water assets? There's no reason why it couldn't. It's just whether we can bring the market along with us and manage some of the challenges that are in our way as well.
Yeah, I love that. So before we wrap, I would be totally remiss if you didn't tell us a little bit about your fingernails.
Oh no! It was my spirit finger for the football, the English flag. I was so sad. None of us are quite over it yet.
But yeah, well, it's a recent wound.
It's still very recent, but here's to third place.
There you go. No, it was a good game. All right. Well, Hannah, anything else before we wrap?
I'm excited for the future. Let's see what we can do.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us at this episode of Unfiltered at the Water Cooler, and thank you all for watching.
My pleasure. Lovely to see you.
All right. Take care. Bye.